Hello and welcome back to our module 5. In this module today, we shall be dealing with the role of the governments, non-government organizations, and institutions, and also about certain international agreements like the UNFCCC, the SDGs, and the Paris Agreement. Now, before we delve into our today's topic of the roles of the government, the roles of NGOs and institutions, or the international agreements, quick recap about what we studied in our previous topic about the key environmental acts and policy frameworks in India. We had our Environment Protection Act, the Wildlife Conservation Act, the Air Act, Water Act, the NGT Act, and all these acts and other policy frameworks were designed in a way to provide protection to the environment against harmful, illegal, and insensitive activities of humans. So, as we begin today, from the role of government, first of all the acts that we studied in our previous topic were enactments of the government. So, of course, the first role that comes is policy formulation. The government enacts laws and policies like the Environment Protection Act, the National Environmental Policy, and develops a national mission, NAPCC, for sustainable development. So it's a bit constitutional law point to share here, but we know that it is the legislature that enacts laws, makes laws, legislates in the parliament, makes policies. It is the executive that looks for its execution, the IAS officers, IPS officers, the execution, and the judiciary, which sees that these laws are being followed and carried out in consonance with the Constitution of India. The second role of the government, apart from making laws and policies, is regulation and enforcement sets. So, regulation and enforcement is also important. It's not just that you make a law and you forget about it. The government needs to set standards for industries about their emissions and waste management. It has to monitor that they are being complied with through central pollution control boards, state pollution control boards, and it penalizes the violation of environmental norms. So, this is also the role of the government. The government makes laws, checks the regulation, and enforcement of the same. The other key role of the government is institutional framework. It is the government that has to establish dedicated bodies like Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change Ministry. This ministry is responsible for all the environmental action planning in India. The central and state pollution control boards, like we studied, the National Green Tribunal Board for Legal Enforcement. Now, all of this comes under the role of the government. The other roles of the government, again, public awareness and education, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Namami Gange. These are the projects that we've all heard about. We've all heard about the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. It was quite the flagship during the elections last time. Namami Gange, we all know crores of funds have been, thousands of crores in fact, have been allocated for the cleanliness drive of River Ganga. So all of these public awareness and educational campaigns and big movements under the government, which promote environmental education, which promote cleanliness drives, are also again the role of the government. And the government being the representative of the people, by the people, for the people, represents India at international forums and in international collaborations. This government of India represents India in global environmental summits and treaties, implements agreements like the Paris Agreement, which we shall be dealing with today in this video, on climate change convention, on biological diversity, and even otherwise. Because India is a signatory to the UN, anything that remotely touches the concepts of environment or sustainability, the government of India is the representative of India in such forums. The government of India is also the stakeholder engagement doer, and it encourages public participation in environmental decision making and supports other NGOs and civil societies and local communities in the conservation efforts. Now, now it is the government of India who knows the demographics of this country really well. They have all the data. Is how they support NGOs, civil societies, hyper local action. Now, by hyper local action, we mean that people of the rural belts or the tribal belts, only those people are aware of what is happening at the grassroots level. You and I, sitting in metropolitan cities, cannot possibly comment on what's happening in the villages of Rajasthan where there's no water, what's happening in the forests of Meghalaya where there's only forest produce and no external support. So hyper local action is important. And because the government of India is like the custodian of everyone over here, they have the demographic details and hence they promote public participation in environmental decision making. Budget allocation, of course. Now, budget allocation is something which we will study causes quite an impediment to achieve the sustainable development goals which we have set very ambitiously for 2030. Budget and will are two key important things to achieve any sustainable development goal for that matter. So the government is also responsible for budget allocation and incentives. It provides financial support for clean energy, afforestation, and green tech, offers subsidies and tax benefits for eco-friendly practices. Now, you all must be aware that the installation of solar panels at home, the government offers subsidies and rebates on people for their electricity bills who have adopted for solar panel installations. Now, as important as the government is as a functionary in environmental policy making or conservation and future pathway laying, sometimes non government organizations who tirelessly work just for the cause are also equally important. The role of these NGOs ranges from the diverse features like awareness and education. They conduct awareness campaigns. I myself have conducted various campaigns with an NGO that I worked with once. And you just do it because you're out there looking out for nature. There's no vested interest in it. So, for environmental campaigning, the NGOs play a very crucial role. The NGOs conduct campaigns on pollution, deforestation, waste management. They do cleanliness drives, they clean the beaches in Mumbai, they clean the roadsides in metropoles. Also, community mobilization. The NGOs are a great place for people to come together for a cause. The hyper local action that we just talked about, the NGOs are very pivotal in engaging local communities in conservation efforts. Oh God. Policy advocacy. The NGOs who are extensive in their research, who are very hyperlocal in action, also influence the government decisions and promote green legislation. Someone who's good at something could be an artisan from remote village of Rajasthan who knows the importance of the earthen pot. An NGO who meets him gets to know about the same as to how the water in the pot is kept cool and how the earthen pot also extracts the harmful elements in water and how the ghada being used is important. So such NGOs when work at the local level, they influence government with their papers or publications or a dialogue or discussion. And such discussions then influence government policy making and promote a green legislation. Another role of the NGOs could be research and monitoring. They conduct studies, monitor biodiversity and pollution levels. Now, it's not very natural for an NGO to conduct studies and monitor biodiversity because, again, this requires a lot of funding. But if the NGO is very functional and has a lot of support from community, you can really take that forward with conducting studies and monitoring what's going right and wrong. And it's mostly many NGOs that publish papers on the AQI these days. Legal intervention. The NGOs file the public interest litigations now because environment concerns everyone, and the NGOs are the right space to file such PILs for public interest. So again, that's a very important role of the NGOs in judicial green legislation. Afforestation and conservation, many NGOs starting from the school level organize tree planting and restore degraded lands. Cleanliness drives, it's something we've all seen maybe in our school days or college days. Role of NGOs again. These are a few important NGOs, like I mentioned over here, that if the NGOs are really being supported and the community is giving them good funding and they're recognized by the government as well, they can conduct studies and they can monitor biodiversity and they can influence government decisions and promote green legislation. Some of the important NGOs in India are the Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. It works on environmental education, policy research, and advocacy. It played a key role in pushing the CNG buses in Delhi. Now, Delhi has a lot of CNG green buses, and this NPO was the reason why that happened. Chipko movement again was one great movement we all have studied in the previous module. Terry Terry is also a very good institute which works on sustainable development. They had also published a Green India report 2047, and this Delhi-based institute also works on sustainable development, climate change, and energy efficiency. It also hosts the annual World Sustainable Development Summit. Greenpeace India, again, we've all heard about it, focuses on climate change, deforestation, and sustainable agriculture, known for its campaigns against coal mining in forest areas. Now, in forest areas, there's a lot of coal because the forest is where those nutrients replenish and coal forms. So, this Greenpeace India is known for its campaign against coal mining. Now, quickly before we end this part of the module, few international agreements where environment was pivotal. The agreements of international course that we shall be studying here today are UNFCCC. The Sustainable Development Goals was extensively studied, so a brief passing reference would be given for the same, and then the Paris Agreement. So, as the name suggests, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, this was a convention also known as the Rio Summit, came into force in 1994. The objective was about greenhouse gases, the one that causes ozone depletion, and how we can prevent these greenhouse gases that are, sorry, they cause global warming. Ozone depletion is caused by the chlorofluorocarbons. So, how to stabilize these greenhouse gases concentrations in the atmosphere to prevent dangerous human interference with the climate system? And India was definitely a party to this convention. Key features that we can study are that common but differentiated responsibilities. Now, CBBR is very interesting of a term. It's about that there's no straitjacket formula or one size fits all for every environmental problem. Every problem has a different solution. It has to be common, but each country can have a differentiated responsibility and a way to tackle with it. And of course, it for the first time called for the need for sustainable development, and it told the member countries to report emissions and climate policy makings. Based on this, India also made many climate policies because India was again a signatory to this convention. Development developed national strategies to reduce emissions because it was seen that the global warming was because of certain greenhouse gases, and the nations need to develop strategies to combat that and also cooperate in climate research and technology sharing. Major agreements that happened under this convention were the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. We shall study the Paris Agreement, but it could be an important MCQ question that the Paris Agreement limits global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius. And each country submitted a and each country submitted a nationally determined contribution. And India, again, an important question. India committed to reduce emission intensity of GDP, increase non-fossil energy capacity, and create a carbon sink through afforestation. Now, what is carbon sink? Carbon sink is when the levels of carbon are lower than oxygen. Bhutan is one such country where there's carbon sink. India and UNFCCC, like we just studied, it was an active participant and it submitted its own ambitious NDCs and implemented the National Action Plan on Climate Change. And quickly, the Sustainable Development Goals, something we have studied in our module extensively, but we should know that it was adopted by 193 countries, the 2030 Agenda, including India, of course. Something we may have missed in our module about sustainable development goals last time is that there are 5 pillars of sustainability, the 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. Very important. Indian governance and SDGs. In India, the regulation and implementation and functioning qua the SDGs is led by the Niti Aayog. The initiatives include Swachh Bharat, Goal 6, Ujjwal Yojana, Goal 7, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, Empowerment of Women, 4 and 5, and Jal Jeevan Mission, Goal 6. A few fact checks about where we are today and in India as well. Kerala and Himachal Pradesh, Chandigarh are the top SDG performers, and the challenges that we face gravely are to achieve these 3 goals of zero hunger, clean water, and sanitation, because 70% of surface water in India is contaminated. And then India is the third largest producer of CO2. So even that's one challenge for India. Now, lastly, for this lecture, the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was COP21 in Paris, 2015. It was a treaty on climate change ratified by many countries, including India. The objectives of limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius is an MC question with regards to Paris Agreement. And Of course, make finance flows consistent with low carbon, climate resilient development. The Paris Agreement achieves strikes to achieve net zero emissions globally. And the key features are that NDCs, the national determined contributors, India also signed many ambitious NDCs from its part. Countries set their own climate action targets, which are revised every 5 years: emission reduction, renewable energy, adaptation, and finance plans. Again, common but differentiated responsibilities, principle of equity. India's role and commitment with regards to the this is an interesting point of MCQ. India ratified the Paris Agreement on 2nd October on Gandhi Jayanti in 2016. And India's NDCs were, like here I've mentioned, and we're doing good. We are shifting to electric cars and non-fossil sources, but there's a lot more work to do. Major initiatives, the Life Movement is important. The National Green Hydrogen Mission is important. And India has also hosted the International Solar Alliance. So that's India's role and commitment. But of course, challenges wait. And budgeting climate finance is a big problem. Global emissions are a problem at the global level. And in times like today, where the world is so volatile and wars sound like something that can happen anytime, a stronger a stronger need for oneness and global cooperation is needed to preserve the environment. The way forward is, of course, strengthening global cooperation and focusing on climate justice and green growth. We must all really put this in our minds that if there's no nature, we're not going to survive. So, those are the challenges and way forward. And that was a quick reference to the SDGs and Paris Agreement. In our next video, in this module, we will be studying about technological innovations and future of sustainability, and a recap of the role of government, NGOs, and institutions would also be done. And I'll see you soon. Thank you.